It's important for us to understand the science and align our advocacy with the science as well. I think just for the interest of time, I want to call Joseph Sehodi to do our closing remarks. And please, if you have comments for Mr. Thalerwa, please share those comments in the chat box. He will appreciate those comments in the chat as well. With that, I would like to welcome mm, Joseph Sehudi from UNICEF. Just to note that all the work around LCOY, from the webinars to the conference and to the Children and Youth Statement on Climate Change, is being supported by the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF. Joseph, if you're here, please feel free to jump in with closing remarks and maybe some takeaways from the session.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you, Tsepiso. Yeah, thanks for, for the opportunity, and probably maybe in starting my closing remarks, just thank Re Thalerwa here for his, I think, elaborate presentation, which is, I think it's the recent one from the list of presentations that we got this morning. And I'm also picking on him because I think he somehow answered one of the questions that I had earlier on for Tasnim. I hope I said the name right. For Tasnim around climate financing, which, for me, the question was around, as we are advocating for climate financing, should we be more on the emission reduction side, or investing a lot more on the resilience building side of things? And I think from Red Thalerwa's presentation, what I'm getting, or my takeaway from it is, there isn't a lot that we can do in terms of how climate change is affecting us. I think at this point, we can do what we can do in reduction of emissions, but, the issue has already been done, and we are facing the repercussions right now. And what we can do is build that resilience. I think prioritizing around that really makes a lot of good sense. So thanks a lot, Red Thalero, for that elaborate presentation. And I think maybe just making a bit of reflection from the previous presentations. I think the webinar itself, I think it was well arranged. I mean, when I look at the list of the speakers that we've had here, we touched on some of the key things when it comes to climate action and sustainability. One of those being communication for climate action, and the Rel Thalera's presentation on the science behind climate change, because some of these issues around climate change can be a bit scientific. And when you are able to get somebody who's able to break them down to us and how they affect or change the situation for, in our daily lives, it's really useful, I think, when you combine the science and the communication bit around it. So I think it was a helpful move around there. And, also, I think two presentations that were focusing on the positioning of young people. I think one from Elizabeth, positioning of young people themselves within the climate action and sustainability, it was quite useful. I saw a lot of clapping of hands going off, and even the comments really were attesting to that. And as well as Tasneem's presentation, I think it was, a bit on the radical side, also side of things. I mean, it was more, it touched on the economics, but also on the political side of the climate change issue, which for me, I think the lesson, or what I take away from that presentation is about, one of the key advocacy issues being climate financing. And, I think it's key. Always, whenever, I think one of the key indicators when you are advocating for something is, if you see money following through, then you know that you're actually doing something right. And wherever people are talking and there isn't money coming through, there isn't a lot that can move. So I really do agree 100% with Tasnim on the one of the key things being climate financing around there. So, all in all to say, I think it was really a useful session, quite insightful, and having that richness that can bring someone into the picture of climate action and sustainability in the context of Botswana. And, as UNICEF, for us, because we are a child-focused organization, obviously, our interest in climate change is from a social justice perspective because children and young people are the ones that will largely inherit the future that, we create today. So it's very critical for us to make sure that, we put in the hand and we support where we can be able to support to push the agenda forward. And I mean, one of those things is, I think this was in 2022 or 23, if I'm not sure, on what we call the UN Convention on the Rights of Children. There was a general comment that was adopted, talking about the rights of children to access clean and sustainable environments. It's actually showcasing something that can trickle down from that top level of National Assembly and be able to see how we contextualize those as we come to the country level. So we have a keen interest in that as UNICEF, and this is why you see us partnering with some of the local organizations that are pushing the mandate of climate action, especially for young people. And we will always be there along with some of our other sister agencies like UNDP, whom we normally work with around this. And I think in closing, maybe lastly, um, Tsepiso and colleagues, I think on the webinar, I I would just want to share an insight for you all as young people to say, you know, sometimes we take for granted the power of being a young person. And I mean, talking from experience, and probably Red Halerwa here might also agree with me. When you are a young person, you do have the opportunity to be bold and to be as ambitious as you can, um, with little repercussions. Because, we have a lot of young people today being affected by a lot of things, and there is attention, there is an ear for young people. And also, it is taken that young people do have the ideas and do have the drive for the other things, and people do listen. And once you transition out of the youth stage, a lot of things you actually lose them when it comes to you being bold and being ambitious, because you become part of, systems, you become part of something, and when you become bold, there's a lot that you're likely to lose. So as a young person, I think, you do have that advantage, and I would like to urge you to really capitalize on the advantage that you have as you develop in your position paper and even in the general advocacy around climate action, to actually be bold, be ambitious, and demand a seat, in those forums or those platforms where decision making is being done. It's, even if people try to push, they will try to push, not so hard, because simply because you are young people. So, take advantage of that. I think later on in life, you can be able to look back and say, this is how I spent my youth days and I contributed to one, two, three, four. So don't let this opportunity really surpass you by, and capitalize on it. I think in terms of my closing remarks, Tsepi, so that is it. I'm really happy with the deliberations today, and looking forward to what's coming more. Thanks everyone. Over.
Thank you so much for that, Joseph Sahudi from UNICEF. And I think lastly to thank all our participants for this webinar. I'd like to welcome Louisa April, who is part of the organizing team for LCOY Botswana 2024. Louisa, welcome. The floor is yours for the thank you remarks, rather, not welcome. Far from welcome. Louisa, over to you.
All right, perfect. Nicole Rumbick here. I just wanted to do the closing remarks because I think we're having technical difficulties with Louisa April, which should be fine. But yeah, I'm just here to thank everybody for coming through, taking the time out of your mornings to come through. Thank you to our sponsors, all of our speakers. This was very insightful information. UNICEF, Tepiso as well, Pato, all everybody that came through to collaborate on this and make sure that it was a success. I think it was very important, very informative. We learned a lot. And thank you for making time. We look forward to working with you some more in the future and simply engaging more and engaging the youth in everything that we have coming up. Over to you, Tapiso.
All right, thank you very much, Nicole. Nicole Rombe is also part of the organizing team, coming in from Sustain 267. And just a final word before we log out, there are opportunities to further engage. One, this is the first webinar in this series of activities around LCOY. The next webinar will be next week, Wednesday, same time. We will be getting into, the thematic discussions now around building up a draft of the position paper. Please make sure that you come back and you're part of this conversation. This will be a more discursive session getting into building up a draft for the position paper. And also do help us share the link to that webinar with your networks as well. If you have younger colleagues, if you have younger brothers and sisters, please make sure that you help us reach out to them as well. But also register for the delegate registrations for LCOY, which will be held later this month on the 23rd and 24th, are out. And so the delegate registration form should be in the chat, but they will also be shared as a follow-up email after this webinar. That delegate all right, technical difficulties. Yes, so the delegate registration form will also have questions that are very important for the further development of the position paper. So please I know it might be a long form to fill, but it's important that you help contribute to the other parts of the delegate registration form as well. We are looking out for volunteers as well to put in their hands for the successful, convening of the Conference of Youth. And so we will share the volunteer registration form. It will also be shared in the chat just now. So if you're interested in being part, in supporting the conference as a volunteer, please fill in the volunteer registration form as well. Yeah, I think that's just about it. Thank you so much for joining us today. Part of this work means committing time, and we understand that young people are equally busy. Young people are working, young people are schooling, but you took your time today to join us for this conversation. Please also commit to joining us next week and during the full conference in a couple of weeks. More information will be shared as a follow-on email from this webinar. Thank you very much, everyone. Tech support, are we good?
We're good.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Goodbye, everyone. See you next week.